The past returned on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind of day that felt ordinary until it wasn't. Claire Matthews was standing by her kitchen window, watching yellow leaves slide across the driveway when her phone rang. The name on the screen made her pause. Linda Harris. Linda had been her closest friend for more than 25 years. They had shared college nights, weddings, hospital rooms, and long talks that lasted until sunrise. Claire smiled and answered, not knowing that this simple call would open a door she had sealed long ago. Linda's voice was bright, full of emotion, moving fast. Her son was coming home, Ethan, after years away. After building a life on the other side of the country, he was finally returning. Claire listened quietly, leaning against the counter, memories rising without warning. She remembered Ethan as a child, small hands wrapped around a basketball too big for him. His laugh, loud and careless. His voice calling her Aunt Claire whenever Linda was busy. Claire congratulated Linda, said all the right words, and ended the call feeling strangely unsettled. She told herself it was only nostalgia, nothing more. But the calm of her afternoon was already gone. That evening, Claire sat across from her husband, Daniel, at the dinner table. The TV murmured in the background, filling the space between them. Daniel scrolled through his phone, nodding at things she said but not really hearing them. Claire mentioned Ethan's return, expecting a response, maybe a comment. But Daniel only said, "That's nice," without looking up. Claire felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Their marriage wasn't loud in its problems. It was quiet, slow, and distant, like a road that had stretched too long without turns. After dinner, Daniel went to bed early, as he often did. Claire stayed up alone, washing dishes, thinking about a boy who was no longer a boy and wondering why his name had stirred, something she couldn't name. The welcome dinner was held at Linda's house the following Sunday. Claire almost didn't go. She stood in front of her closet for too long, unsure why choosing a simple dress felt important. In the end, she picked something modest, something safe. She drove over as the sun dipped low, the sky painted in soft orange light. Linda's house looked the same as always, warm, inviting, full of life. The moment Claire stepped inside, she heard laughter coming from the living room. It was deeper than she remembered, calmer, confident. When she turned the corner, she saw him. Ethan stood near the couch, taller than she expected, broader shoulders, relaxed posture. He turned when Linda called his name, and his eyes met Claire's. There was a second of surprise, then recognition, then a gentle smile. "Aunt Claire," he said, though his voice no longer belonged to a child. Claire felt her breath catch for reasons she didn't understand. She smiled back, greeting him with a polite hug that lasted just a moment too long. Dinner moved quickly. The table was loud with stories, questions, and laughter. Ethan talked about his work, his move, the lessons he had learned being away. He spoke with respect, choosing his words carefully. Claire noticed how he looked at people when they spoke, how he didn't interrupt, how he smiled without forcing it. When he laughed, it felt real. At one point, he asked Claire about her job, her hobbies, her life. Not as a polite gesture, but with genuine interest. She answered, surprised by how icily the words came. Daniel rarely asked her such things anymore. The realization made her uncomfortable, and she pushed it away, focusing on her plate, reminding herself who Ethan was and what this moment meant. After dinner, Linda went to take a call, leaving Claire and Ethan alone in the kitchen. The space felt smaller without the noise. Ethan offered to help clean up. They moved around each other carefully, passing plates, filling the sink, avoiding eye contact at first. Then Ethan spoke, telling her how much he remembered her kindness when he was younger, how she always treated him like he mattered. Claire felt a warmth spread through her, mixed with something sharper. She laughed it off, saying she had just been doing what any friend would do. Ethan shook his head, saying it meant more than she knew. Their eyes met again, and this time, neither looked away too quickly. Claire felt the moment stretch, then break when Linda returned, loud and cheerful, pulling them back into reality. When the night ended, Claire hugged Linda goodbye and shook Ethan's hand, formal and distant now. He thanked her for coming, his tone respectful, controlled. As Claire drove home, the road lights blurred slightly. She felt restless, unsettled by emotions she didn't want to name. At home, Daniel was already asleep. Claire changed quietly and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the evening in her mind, not focusing on anything specific, just the feeling it left behind. It wasn't desire, she told herself. It was simply being reminded of a time when life felt open, when connections were easy. Still, her heart beat faster than usual, and sleep came late. Over the next few days, Ethan's presence seemed to linger in unexpected ways. Linda mentioned him often, asking Claire to stop by again soon. Claire agreed, though she wasn't sure why. She told herself it was loyalty, friendship, habit. Yet each time she thought of seeing Ethan again, her stomach tightened slightly. She reminded herself of boundaries, of history, of the quiet promises she had made to herself years ago. She believed those promises were strong enough. At least, she wanted to believe they were. What Claire didn't know was that the story had already begun moving forward. Quietly and without permission. The return of someone from the past had opened a door she hadn't noticed was unlocked. And once opened, even just a little, it would be impossible to pretend it had never been there at all. The weeks after Ethan's return moved faster than Claire expected, as if time itself had decided to push her forward without asking. Linda invited her over often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for coffee. Claire agreed more than she should have. Each visit felt normal on the surface, safe and familiar, yet something beneath it kept shifting. Ethan was always there, never trying to take attention, never forcing his presence. He helped his mother with chores, fixed small things around the house, and spoke when spoken to. Still, Claire noticed him. Not in the way she feared, but in a quiet way that made her aware of her own thoughts. He carried himself with calm confidence, and his words were thoughtful, never careless. It made being around him easy, almost too easy. One afternoon, Claire stopped by to drop off some papers Linda had forgotten at her place. Linda was in the backyard on a call, and Ethan answered the door. He smiled and invited her in, offering coffee. Claire hesitated, then agreed. They sat at the kitchen table, sunlight cutting through the window, warming the space. Their talk stayed light at first: work, weather, small changes in town. Then Ethan asked about her life. Not in a polite way, but with real focus. He asked how long she had been married, what made her happy, what she wished she had done differently. The questions were honest, not personal in a wrong way, but they made Claire pause. No one had asked her such things in years. She answered carefully, choosing safe words, keeping the truth just out of reach. As days passed, these small moments added up. There was no single event that felt wrong. No loud signal telling Claire to step back. It was the quiet comfort that confused her most. Ethan never crossed a clear line. He never spoke in a way that felt improper. He listened, nodded, smiled, and remembered small details she shared. Claire told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she was over, yet she found herself looking forward to seeing him. Even as guilt followed close behind. One evening, Linda hosted a casual dinner with only the three of them. The mood was relaxed. Music played softly in the background. After eating, Linda stepped out to take a phone call, leaving Claire and Ethan in the kitchen again. Claire began clearing the table. Ethan stood to help, moving around the small space. The room felt quiet, almost too still. As Ethan reached past her to grab a dish, his hand brushed against her lower back. It wasn't sudden or rough. It was light, brief, and almost easy to ignore. But Claire felt it instantly. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She stepped forward quickly, her breath uneven. Ethan froze, his face changing as he realized what had happened. "I'm sorry," he said at once, his voice low and serious. "I didn't mean that." Claire nodded without looking at him. "It's okay," she said, though it wasn't. Her heart was beating fast and her thoughts were tangled. Linda returned moments later, breaking the tension, unaware of the shift that had taken place. The rest of the evening passed without incident, but Claire felt distant, her smile forced, her mind elsewhere. When she got home that night, she sat in her car for a long time before going inside. She replayed the moment again and again, questioning it from every angle. She told herself it was accidental. She told herself she was imagining things. Yet something inside her had changed. It wasn't about the touch itself, but what it had stirred. Awareness, attention, a feeling she had forgotten she could still feel. The thought made her uncomfortable, and she pushed it away, ashamed of even considering it. Days later, Claire found herself back at Linda's house for a small gathering. This time, more people were around. She kept her distance from Ethan, staying close to Linda, focusing on conversations that didn't matter. Ethan noticed. He didn't approach her, didn't force a moment alone. His restraint should have eased her, but instead, it made the air between them heavier. At one point, as Claire stood near the hallway, Ethan passed behind her. She felt his presence before she saw him. This time, there was no accident. His hand rested briefly but clearly against her bottom. It lasted less than a second. He pulled away immediately. Claire froze. Her mind went blank. The noise around her faded as shock rushed in. Ethan's face went pale. "I shouldn't have done that," he whispered, his voice tight. "I'm sorry." Claire didn't respond. She didn't shout or react outwardly. She simply stepped away, her hand shaking. She found Linda and said she wasn't feeling well. Linda hugged her, concerned, and told her to rest. Claire left quickly, her thoughts racing, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't sort through. That night, Claire lay awake in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. She felt anger toward Ethan, toward herself, toward the situation she had allowed to grow quietly. She felt guilt for thoughts she hadn't acted on but couldn't deny. She knew the line had been crossed, even if nothing more had happened. The trust she had in herself felt fragile now. Early the next morning, her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan appeared on the screen. "I crossed a line. I take full responsibility. I respect you, and I won't contact you again unless you want me to." Claire read it once. Then again. Her finger hovered over the screen, unsure what to do. She thought of Linda. She thought of Daniel. She thought of the version of herself she wanted to protect. In the end, she didn't reply. She set the phone down and sat quietly, letting the silence speak for her. The situation was no longer small or harmless. It had become something she could not ignore. And she knew the choices she made next would matter more than the moment that started it all. The silence after that message was heavier than any argument Claire had ever faced. She woke each morning with the same tight feeling in her chest, as if her body remembered the moment even when she tried not to. She went through her days on autopilot, answering emails, driving familiar roads, smiling at coworkers without hearing what they said. Ethan's message stayed unread after the second glance, sitting on her phone like a quiet warning. She didn't delete it. She didn't reply. Leaving it there felt like the only way to keep control. At home, Daniel noticed something was off, but only in small ways. Claire was quieter. She stayed up later, sat alone more often, and avoided conversation that went deeper than simple facts. Daniel asked once if she was stressed at work. Claire nodded and changed the subject. It was easier than explaining a truth she barely understood herself. The distance between them had always been there, but now it felt wider, sharper. Claire wondered how long it had been since Daniel had looked at her with real interest. The thought made her feel sad, then guilty for even thinking it. She stopped visiting Linda. At first, she used excuses. Too busy. Not feeling well. Later, she stopped explaining at all. Linda called, confused but patient, assuming Claire needed time. Each missed call tightened the knot in Claire's stomach. Linda had trusted her for years. Claire felt like she was breaking something precious without touching it. She promised herself she would never let this reach Linda's ears. Some mistakes, she believed, should end quietly. Nights were the hardest. Claire lay awake, replaying everything that had led to this point. Not the touch itself, but the moments before it. The long talks. The feeling of being heard. The comfort that came to as silly. She told herself that attraction wasn't a crime, but allowing it to grow was a choice. She faced that truth without excuses. She had stayed in rooms longer than needed. She had answered questions she could have avoided. She had liked the attention more than she wanted to admit. That realization hurt more than anything Ethan had done. days turned into weeks. Ethan kept his promise. There were no messages, no calls, no attempts to explain himself further. His silence was respectful, and in some ways that made it harder. Claire had expected anger or defense, something she could react against. Instead, she was left alone with her thoughts. She wondered how he was handling it, whether he felt the same confusion or if he had already moved on. She quickly stopped herself. His feelings were no longer her concern. One afternoon, Claire ran into Linda at the grocery store. The meeting was sudden, unavoidable. Linda looked relieved to see her, pulling her into a warm hug. Claire felt a wave of shame but held it back. They talked briefly about simple things, weather, work, plans for the weekend. Linda mentioned Ethan was thinking of moving closer to the city, starting fresh. Claire nodded, forcing calm into her voice. She said goodbye quickly, claiming she was in a rush. As she walked away, her hands shook slightly. She knew she couldn't avoid Linda forever. But she also knew she needed distance until her thoughts settled. At home, Claire made a decision. She deleted Ethan's message. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Keeping it felt like holding on to something that no longer belonged in her life. As the screen went blank, she felt both lighter and sadder. That message had been proof that the moment had happened, that it was real. Now, all that remained was memory, and memory fades when not fed. Still, something inside her had changed. Claire realized the issue wasn't Ethan. It was the emptiness she had ignored for too long. She had allowed herself to feel invisible, to accept silence as normal. The attention from Ethan had simply exposed what was already missing. That truth was uncomfortable, but it was also clear. She couldn't fix her marriage by pretending nothing was wrong, and she couldn't escape her feelings by blaming someone else. One evening, Claire sat across from Daniel on the couch. The TV was off. The room was quiet. She told him she felt lonely, that she felt unseen. She didn't mention Ethan. She didn't need to. Daniel looked surprised, then thoughtful. He listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't seen in years. He admitted he had been distant, distracted, careless without meaning to be. The conversation was slow, careful, but honest. It didn't solve everything, but it opened a door Claire hadn't known how to knock on before. After that night, Claire felt steadier. The pull of the past weeks began to fade. She focused on herself, on what she wanted her life to feel like moving forward. She returned Linda's calls, met her for coffee, and acted normal. Ethan was never mentioned. Claire was grateful for that. Some things, she believed, were better left unspoken, not out of fear, but out of respect. Months passed. The tension eased. The memory of that brief moment with Ethan lost its sharp edge, turning into a lesson rather than a wound. Claire understood now that attraction alone didn't define a person. Choices did. And she had chosen to stop before the damage became permanent. Still, on quiet evenings, when the house was still and her thoughts wandered, Claire reflected on how close she had come to changing everything. Not because she wanted to betray anyone, but because she had forgotten to listen to herself. The experience had forced her to face truths she could no longer ignore. And while it had shaken her, it had also made her stronger, more aware, and more careful with the fragile lines that hold lives together. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again ignore the warning signs of her own heart, or underestimate how quickly comfort could turn into something dangerous when left unchecked. Spring arrived quietly, without asking permission, and with it came a sense of calm that Claire had not felt in a long time. The heavy weight she had carried for months slowly began to lift. Life did not change overnight, but it moved forward in small, steady steps. She focused on her work, rebuilt daily routines, and gave her marriage the attention it had long been missing. Conversations with Daniel became more honest. They walked together in the evenings, shared meals without screens, and learned again how to listen. Nothing was perfect, but it was real. And that mattered more than perfection. One afternoon, while running errands downtown, Claire stepped into a small bookstore to escape the rain. The air smelled of paper and coffee, and the quiet felt comforting. As she moved between the shelves, scanning familiar titles, she sensed someone nearby. When she looked up, her breath paused. Ethan stood a few feet away, holding a book, his expression just as surprised as hers. Time seemed to slow, then settle. There was no panic, no rush to leave, just two people facing a moment they had both known might come one day. Ethan spoke first. His voice was calm, steady. He said it was good to see her and hoped she was doing well. Claire nodded, returning the greeting. The awkwardness passed quickly, replaced by a quiet understanding. They didn't need to explain why they hadn't spoken. The silence between them already held the truth. They walked together toward the front of the store, keeping a respectful distance, their steps slow and careful. "I've thought a lot about that day," Ethan said. Not with pride, with regret. Claire listened, her heart steady. "So have I," she replied. "But I don't see it as something that defines us." It was a moment. What mattered was what came after. Ethan agreed. He told her he had learned from it that he understood the importance of boundaries, respect, and responsibility. There was no attempt to justify his actions, no emotional pressure in his words. Claire appreciated that. She told him she had done the same kind of thinking, that the experience had forced her to face parts of her life she had avoided for too long. Their honesty felt clean, not heavy. They reached the door. Outside, the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. Ethan held the door open, a simple, polite gesture. Before parting, he looked at her and said, "You deserved better than confusion. I'm glad you chose yourself." Claire smiled, not out of sadness, but acceptance. "I hope you build a good life," she said. "One that doesn't carry this weight." They said goodbye without touching, without promises, without regret. As Claire walked to her car, she felt closure settle in her chest like a final breath released. That evening, Claire returned home to a quiet house filled with soft light. Daniel was in the kitchen cooking dinner. He looked up and smiled, a real smile. Claire joined him, helping without being asked. As they ate, they talked about their day, about plans, about small dreams they had once shared and were slowly rediscovering. Claire realized she no longer felt pulled backward by what had happened. The story no longer owned her. She owned it later that night. Claire sat by the window, watching the rain fade into darkness. She thought about Linda, about loyalty, about the thin lines that hold relationships together. She had protected those lines, not perfectly, but honestly. She knew she would never tell Linda what had happened. Not out of fear, but because the situation had ended before it became a betrayal. Carrying the lesson quietly felt like the right choice. Weeks passed and life continued. Claire and Linda returned to their normal rhythm. Coffee dates, shared laughter, familiar comfort. Ethan was rarely mentioned, and when he was, it was casually, without tension. Claire felt relief in that. The balance had been restored. Looking back, Claire understood that the moment with Ethan had not been about desire alone. It had been a mirror, showing her what she had been missing within herself. The experience had forced her to grow, to speak, to choose truth over escape. It had reminded her that emotional neglect can be just as powerful as emotional connection. And that awareness is often born from discomfort. Claire didn't see herself as a victim or a villain. She saw herself as human. Someone who stood close to a mistake, recognized it, and stepped back before it became something irreversible. That understanding gave her peace. As the seasons changed again, Claire felt grounded. She no longer feared quiet moments or unexpected emotions. She trusted herself more. And in that trust, she found strength. The story that once threatened to break her became the reason she rebuilt. Not with drama, not with secrets, but with clarity. Some stories end with passion. Others end with truth. Claire's ended with a choice. The choice to walk away, to grow, and to protect the life she had worked so hard to build.